This session is building on what we covered last time. What we were talking about last time was this idea of running trials, Kaizens. Kaizen being a Japanese word that means change for the good or change for the better. And this session is all about how you actually run the Kaizen events, the trial events themselves, and some of the routines that go on during the actual trial itself. And one of the routines that I'll focus in on is problem resolution. So this is what we'll cover really. We'll talk about a bit of a review of the theory that we've covered so far, some of the routines within the Kaizens and the trials. So we talk about startup and wash-up briefs. So as this suggests, startup done at the start of the day, wash-up done at the end of the day event itself. Because what you're trying to do whenever you're running a trial or whenever you're running a Kaizen, you're trying to learn as much as you possibly can about what works and what doesn't work. That's the fundamental reason why you're doing it, really, is to try and understand more about what improvements can you generate within the process, and also what things don't work. So it gives you more information about the process and how the process works. And the way we record that is on problem resolution charts. So I'll talk you through how we log any problems that you may have during the Kaizen event itself. And then what you do with that information is you start to log the problems and start to work out what things you can do to overcome those particular problems. And then the last one, the one-page learning point, is how we document the results of the trial, and then basically how you decide then what is it you're going to do next. So is it a case of you need to revise your thinking and modify the way you've been going about the process for the trial itself, or are you happy with things? Do you want to make this the new way of working? In which case, how are you going to capture that documented new process? How are you going to communicate it to everybody else? And one of the ways that we do that is what we call the one-page learning points or one-page learning sheet. So we'll show you a format for that as well. So that's just basically a review of what we've covered, the topic name. So last week was all about setting up Kaizen events. This week it's all about the actual running of the events. That's really just an outline of the of what we're going to cover against times. We'll also link it in at the bottom there. We're going to link it into the visual management boards as well. So I'll talk you through when you're doing trials. I always use a visual management board, so a whiteboard, as a means of communicating to everybody what's going on within the Kaizen event itself. So very quickly, just a very brief reminder of the stuff that we've covered. So this is the overview of the 5 lean principles and also the Tim Woods, the types of waste. Then we moved on to talk about process mapping, and we talked through how you map out a process and identify what adds value, what doesn't add value. We then talked about waste walks, and nearly all of you have started to do a waste walk now, where you capture the activities, the times, the distances, how often you're doing it, and then you use that then to work out which parts of the process are taking up the majority of the consuming the majority of the resources, the majority of the time. So that's a waste walk. So it's just a way of documenting what you've got found from your process map. We then talked about prioritization. So how you use the process map or the waste walk to identify problems, and then from these problems you identify things that you can trial, so ideas of things that you can trial, and you populate your process map. So I like to do it on process maps to start off with, because then you can involve more people and you can make it very visual. So you get all your problems and you get all your ideas, and then what you start to use then is the prioritization matrix. So you simply take the post-it notes and the ideas that you've got and you say, is it easy to do? Is it hard to do? Is it low benefit or is it high benefit? And depending on which of these 4 quadrants it lands on, that's where you stick your post-it note. And hopefully what you get are a lot of post-it notes in this top left-hand category. So easy to do, high benefit, quick wins. If you get plenty of them, you're laughing. It's going to be quite easy. If you get lots of these ones at the other end of the scale, which is hard to do, low benefit, it's going to be a lot more difficult. Now, thankfully, nearly every time that I've done this, I have ended up with quite a few orange post-it notes in this top left-hand quadrant, and they're the ones that you're focusing on first of all. Once you've done those, you then go on to your second priority ones. Projects being stuff that's slightly longer to implement. These fill-ins are basically easy to do, but not a great deal of benefit behind them. So they're the second equal priority to the project work. So you make a list basically of all the ideas and trials in order of these priorities. And this is basically that approach summarised on a page. So we did waste walks, identified and prioritised the solutions. Once we've got those prioritised solutions, we then put those onto an action plan. And then the action plan is just a way of tracking progress through on those individual projects and those individual actions, with the idea being is that we, as we implement these ideas, we're checking back to see what impact it's had on the metrics, which could be kilograms per hour, or another productivity metric that you use within your business. And hopefully, as the action plan gets implemented, you can start to see that it's having the positive impact that you predicted. Okay, so that's just a bit of a brief reminder of what we've covered in subsequent sessions. We've talked through your progress on the trials and what actions you're starting to implement now, which is great. And last time we briefly talked through improvement action proposal form. So before you start doing your trials, you just simply document down what it is that you're doing, who's involved, where are you carrying it out, why you're doing this trial, when you're going to do it, what is a breakdown of some of the steps, how much is it going to cost, and what the particular benefits are going to be. So the example we saw from the pack house, I think it was Danny, was a great example of this form being completed to show the benefits of carrying improvements and what potential benefits it could potentially deliver. So it's just a way of articulating up front what you think the benefits of the trial are going to be. Okay, so that's the improvement action proposal form. Last time we went through these steps, which talks about how you go about setting up a Kaizen. So you got there on the left-hand side the literal translation for the Kaizen, and the steps. I'll not go through all these in detail. Just as a reminder, you basically set aside a time for doing it. So you pick the best days on which to do the trial, and you make sure that's booked in to into the people's diaries. Decide on what it is that you want to achieve. So improving picking productivity by 10%. So try and put a target on it like that. So you pick something that can be measured and something that you can actually set a target against. Decide on which area you're going to carry out the trial. So it might be that you pick a particular row of a particular field, or a particular glass house, or a particular part of the business that you want to carry out the trial. If you can, have a comparison glass house or field alongside it where you've done no changes, and that way you get a control metric. So you've got basically a measure of what the improvements are delivering, but then you've also got a control metric of what's been delivered without any improvements being done whatsoever. And hopefully you'll get a positive difference in the area where you have carried out the improvement that you can then use to give you a good idea of what the benefits are going to be of doing this particular project. Step 4, decide who's going to be involved. Just confirm timescales, so the times of the day you're going to run the trial, as well as the dates. Make sure you've got the resources that you need. If there's any special resources or specific resources that you need for the trial itself, say for example you need some weigh scales moving, you need a forklift truck driver to do that, or a tractor driver to help move some capital equipment. It's looking at all those kind of things that you're going to need in order to make sure the trial's a success. Make sure you communicate your plans, so you tell everybody what it is that you're trying to achieve and why you're doing it and what's involved. I find the best way of doing that is having a visual management board displayed in the area. So I'll literally get a whiteboard. I'll write up on the whiteboard what it is that we're doing. So I'll put a copy of the action plan up on the whiteboard of those proposal forms that some of you started to fill in. Stick them up there and just brief everybody and explain to everybody what it is that we're trying to achieve. And then as you start doing the trial itself, I'll actually display the metrics up there as well. So I'll display the measures, whether that's productivity. So hopefully people get quite excited by the changes that you're doing and the impact that it's starting to have on the productivity rates and therefore the piece rates that they can achieve. So that's the best way for me, I found, of communicating, is using a visual management board. If you need any resources in terms of IT equipment and meeting rooms for the trial event itself, then making sure you've got a plan in place for that. I used to book the senior management to come down and observe the trial, and I used to get the team to present back to the senior management team from the visual management board, just to say, look, this is what we've trialed, this is what we wanted to achieve, this is what we have achieved, and this is what we want to do next. So that's why we brief back to the management team. Picking metrics, so mentioned about productivity. Get the consumables that you're going to need. So I used to provide lunch for the teams. So I always used to make sure that we had a buffet lunch for the teams that were involved in the trials. As a little bit of a thank you as well for being involved and going over and above what's required. And also it's a good way of keeping the team together as well, so people don't drift off during lunch breaks. It meant that we could keep the team in one place, and therefore we can maximise what we got out of the trial times that we'd allocated. And then step 13, just walk through the process. So before you actually do the trial itself, just walk through it, check that everything's in place, you've got what you need. There's no reduce down the chances of any last minute mistakes that are going to stop the trial being a success. So that's what we got to last time. This time really is the question is how you actually run these trials. So that's what we'll talk through in a lot more detail now. So once we got to the day of the trial itself with the Kaizen event, the first thing I used to do is get the team together around the visual management board, brief and remind them of what it is that we were trying to achieve, make sure everyone understood what their roles were going to be within the trial, and make sure they knew if there were any problems, how they could escalate those problems, so who to speak to if there were any issues during the trials, and everybody understood what that escalation route was, just in case there were any particular problems. Step 15 is do the trial, so actually run the new improved process. So that might be like some of the things that we've talked about, using runners to deliver empty trays, moving weigh stations, splitting pack benches into two. So whatever the trial is, just make sure that you've picked a metric that you're gonna actually use to measure the improvements that you get out of it. And at the end of the day, I've got down there step 15. What we used to do is we used to record down any problems that had occurred during the day. So we just, as the trial was being run, any problems that we encountered, anything that we didn't think quite worked the way we expected it to do, we used to write it on a problem resolution log. And all we used to do to start off with is just list down every single problem that we encountered during the trial itself. And I'll show you a format of a problem resolution log in a minute. And then at the end of each day, we'd get the team together. We'd talk through how things had gone. So we'd have a debrief, hot debrief, we used to call it. So we'd talk through how things had gone, what problems we'd encountered. We'd make sure we got them written down on the problem resolution log. We'd look at the metrics. So we'd look at how we performed to see whether that was what we expected or not. And then we'd talk through if there was anything that we needed to do before the start of the next day in order to keep the trial going or to improve the trial itself. Step 17, we basically just used to sort of update the visual management board with any with the metrics, or basically how we performed. Making sure that problem resolution log was updated. So we just used that as a way of communicating back to everybody. So those people that weren't involved in the trial, they knew they could walk up to this visual management board, they could look at it, and they get a good understanding of what problems we'd encountered and how things had gone with the actual trial itself. Step 18 on the final day, we used to just basically record down what the lessons learned were from the trial. So we just summarised them. We'd say, what had worked, what hadn't worked, what we were going to adopt as normal way of working. So what we were going to roll out to become the normal way that we operated in the future, and what things we thought actually needed a bit more improvement work doing on them before they were ready to be rolled out. So we just capture all that, and the way we used to capture it is a one-page learning points. I'll show you again further down the slide pack. Presentation back to senior management team. So we used to use the visual management board again. Just used to get the senior management team down, show them the visual management board, show them the results of the trials, show them the lessons learnt, show them the problem resolution logs, and then we used to talk through what the rollout plan was. So that was really our way of just getting buy-in from the senior management team to say, yeah, we agree with what you've done. We think it's worthwhile. We'll back it. If you need any resources, we'll put our hands in our pockets to buy you what you need in order to make this the new way of working. And what we used to encourage the senior management team to do, step 21, is just say thank you to everybody that was involved. So it was a bit of a public thank you for everybody for all their efforts of doing the actual Kaizen event and the trial event itself. After the trial, after the event, we just have a weekly review meeting. So we'd get key members of we won't get everybody back, but we'd certainly get key members of the Kaizen team and the trial team back, and we'd talk through how things were progressing with the rollout, and again what problems we were having, and how we would overcome those problems if we were having any issues and any problems with the rollout plan itself. We used to get people who've been members of the Kaizen team and the trial team. We'd get them to brief their own departments, or when they went back into their own individual areas, so whether they went back into picking or packing or back into the office environment and they come from the office, we'd get them to run a quick brief to the rest of their teams, to up their teams on what had come out of the improvements, and again just a summary of what the lessons learned were. Step 24 is capturing the new way of working. So we used to document it in standard operating procedures. So basically a how-to guide. So it used to step by step how to carry out the new improved process. So who was involved, what materials you needed, what equipment you needed. So it was a bit like the Word document that we send out to you guys that go through how to run each of the lean tools and techniques. It basically just breaks it down into step-by-step detail how you actually go about doing something. And it's the same thing, really, should be the output from the Kaizen event. It should be the way of documenting the new process. Sometimes step 25, it might be that you identify future improvements that you want to do. It's amazing how much you learn by running these Kaizen events. So it might well be that you've identified other things that you want to trial. So creating a list and recommending back to the senior management team that they allocate some resources to looking at other areas of the business should be one output that comes from this. Which links into step 26, which is where else the lessons that you've learned, where else could you apply this? Is there any other parts of the business that you can apply it to? So it's worked in strawberries. Could it work in any other crops? I've mentioned before that we've worked in businesses that are very diverse. So they've done a trial in the fruit picking side of things, and then they've rolled over the benefits into into one of the chicken farms that they've got. So you can literally just look at the wide application of some of the improvements that come out of these Kaizen events themselves. And sometimes it might well be that you do an improvement and it frees up resource, and you have to think through what you do with that extra resource. So there's one area that we worked in, and we reduced down the amount of distance travelled by a supervisor, which freed up more time for the supervisor. So then what we decided to do was allocate that supervisor to spend more time training people on the skills within the process, and therefore hopefully by training them, that helped improve their productivity and their pick rates as well. So if you do achieve any improvements, just thinking through, is any impacts of these improvements that we need to consider as well. Okay, so that's a step-by-step guide on how to run Kaizens, just documenting some of the things that we were building on, some of the things that we've talked about before in the past. I mentioned some of the routines. We used to have a morning review. So when we used to get in before we'd run the trial, and I guess most of you guys do this anyway, we used to have a quick stand-up meeting in front of the visual management board. And the main reason for doing this was to just sort of like reaffirm in people's minds what the trial was, what roles people had within the trial, what the plan was for the day. Just remind them about what the process was if they encountered any issues and if they had any problems. Sometimes you may want to plan in something around about lunchtime. So basically we should just do that over lunch. So we'd all have lunch together at the same time. And whilst we're having lunch, we'd just have a quick chat just to make sure that there was no problems during the trial itself. It might well be that you often find that when you're running the Kaizen, you're all working at different parts of the business. Therefore, all getting together and having lunch together is a good way of just sort of like keeping a track and up to speed with everything that's going on with the trial itself. And then you've got the end of day review, where you capture as much of the problems as you possibly can find during the trial itself and update the problem resolution logs. Talk through if there's anything that's stopping the trial that you may need to resolve before the next day. And then just talk through about what the plan was for the day after. So that, again, before people come in, they fully understand what it is, what their role is going to be before the start of the next day. And obviously updating the metrics on the whiteboard itself, on the visual management board. So any metrics, any problem resolution logs, making sure that that's all updated as a visual record of how the trial's progressing. So that's some of the routines that you can run during, and you can run these, you can carry these on into normal operations. A lot of packing lines that we do work with, they have these meetings at the start of shift and end of shift meetings, just to review progress and talk through any particular problems. The visual management board, this one's from a Smarter producer. So what you've got here is the printout of all the metrics. So we've got here what productivity rates they've achieved in a particular glasshouse. So we could see whether things were getting better or getting worse. This is a problem resolution matrix, a chart at the top. So we just wrote down what's the problem, what is the action, who's going to do it, and when they're going to do it by. So I'll show you one of these in a bit more detail in a minute. But it was just a really neat way of just recording down what problems have been encountered. We used to have on the top of this these bullet points, we used to record down there what it is that we wanted to achieve. So what was the main objective of the Kaizen event itself? So in this instance, productivity improvement of 10% within 3 days. So try and be as specific as what you possibly can be about the objectives of the trial itself. Providing constant feedback to the people that are involved in the trial. There's nothing more motivating. I know a few of you already noticed this. You know, whenever you start putting productivity rates up on a whiteboard, you know, people will start taking an interest in it. And that's the first stage of getting people quite excited about making change to a process. So you get them interested by putting the productivity rates up there. And then what you start talking about with that group of individuals, once they start showing interest, are what ideas have they got for how they can actually improve things and how they can make it easier and reduce down the amount of waste and therefore improve productivity. And at the same time, you can share with them the ideas that you've got that you want to trial. So hopefully that way people get quite excited by the improvements themselves. And I already mentioned about problem resolution and logging down any problems that you encounter, making sure that's visual so everybody can see what actions need to be improved upon in order before the trial can be adopted. Just a bit more detail about resolution charts. This is where you're identifying the 7 ways plus 1. So these are the kind of things that you'd identify. The amount of distance travelled, amount of time spent waiting for things, waiting for trolleys, waiting for packaging. So it's just a way of recording down those kind of problems and putting them up onto the sheet. And then we'll talk you through a technique we used to use called 5 whys. So one of the sessions that we've got further into the modules, that we talk through some simple problem solving techniques. One of them is called 5 whys. You basically just keep asking the question why until you get to what we call the root cause of the problem, and then you work on fixing the root cause, and that way the problem goes away permanently. Whereas if all you do is treat the symptom, the problem keeps coming back over and over again. So we'll show you how you can use that 5 why technique as a way of drilling down to what we call the root cause. The stand-up meetings, try and keep them as quick as possible. So limit them to 15 minutes. If they go on any longer than 15 minutes, people start to lose interest. I literally used to have people standing around the visual management boards, and that way we could get through things quickly, and we didn't lose a big chunk of time by doing that, and people could get back on with the jobs again as quick as possible. And it might well be that you want to invite people from other areas as well. So if you've had a problem between the picking and pack house, quite often I used to invite somebody from the pack house to attend the meetings, and then they could give feedback as to what quality issues they'd had in the pack house the previous day, and then that way the pickers could spend more time looking for those particular issues, knowing that it was causing a problem in the pack house itself. So it might well be that by inviting other people into the problem resolution meetings, these stand-up meetings, it's a really good way of getting them involved and getting their input into the problem. And then keep reiterating it. Everyone I speak to, the amount of improvement they get just by having these whiteboards and these visual management boards with metrics up on them. Just the simple act of putting metrics up sometimes can generate improvements, because people naturally want to improve. They want to get better rates than what they were getting previously. They want to see themselves getting a better productivity than other people, their colleagues. So just by displaying these productivity figures and displaying the metrics, it's amazing what improvements you can actually get. Do any of you have stand-up meetings in the mornings or else at the end of each days?
Yes, we have meetings in the morning. First time in the morning.
What kind of things do you go through?
I tell them what to do usually.
Yeah.
Well, if there are anything special to do, as they know what they have to do, but if there are anything different,
yeah,
or update if with any news or things like that.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Do you have like any whiteboards that you've got metrics on or anything like that sort of like you use to update people and tell people what the plan is?
No, we don't have this.
No, I understand. I mean, that's the next thing to consider is whether that could help with the briefing. And because what I found as well is that if you have it up on a whiteboard, if people forget or if things change, because plans change throughout the day, and if you update the whiteboard, people go back to that and they have a look at that rather than having to keep chasing down a supervisor. Because again, like what we talked about earlier, It's amazing. If you're losing 2-3 minutes every time you need to speak to a supervisor, and you're doing that several times during the day, it can soon mount up. So these whiteboards that have the plan on it and have the metrics on it, it's a really good way of communicating out to people in quite an efficient way.
Yeah, we use whiteboards, and the supervisors have to take the whiteboard with them and put the expectations on the board of what people have to do. But also the supervisors have the manager has a whiteboard for the supervisors to tell them what jobs we're doing, where we're picking, what else is going on the nursery.
Yeah.
So they know a whole week in advance, and obviously that does change, and it's up to them to make sure they watch it. But also we use a WhatsApp group, so the plan goes out on the WhatsApp group, so they know the rough plan, and then the people plan goes on the WhatsApp group to say these people are going to do that job in that block, and these people are going to that job in that block, and it all seems to work.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, it's a really good way of doing it. I've seen that more and more now. People using WhatsApp groups as sending out little like bulletins during the day. Like a new pick list has come out or something like that.
Yeah, we used it for that. So the performance monitoring. So when the figures come in at first break, that can go on the WhatsApp, and then they can look at the fastest picker to see, well, actually, I know they're fast, but is their quality okay? And it also highlights the slower pickers, and you say, well, why are they being so slow? And you can pick out pieces like that, as it's happening. So we use it that way.
I've seen people starting to use MS Teams as well to create electronic visual management boards. So they have like a little MS Teams page, and they're putting like metrics on there as well. And a lot, you can get MS Teams as an app now on most phones, so you can actually display the information on your phone. So it's quite a cheap, cost-effective way of having an electronic visual management board.
Yeah, that would. I mean, we use MS Teams really for the pack house. All the pack house documents are on there, so you can you can put them in front of the computer, the MS Teams, and they can go through all their documents and use that as a training tool for them. So we already do that, but haven't really used it for picking and things like that.
No, that's brilliant. The fact you're using it in the pack house is brilliant. All right, superb. Thank you. And this is just a detail of what's on the problem resolution charts. So what you've got is what the problem is. So what you've witnessed as part of the trial. And like I say, we used to start off using these as part of the trial of the Kaizen. But then once we started using them and getting used to using them, we used to carry on using them during normal production. So it just became a way of logging down any particular problem that we encountered during the day. And then at the end of the day, we used to allocate who was going to fix this problem. Log by was who saw the problem in the first place. Who is it that's going to own it and try and fix it and resolve it? When you expect to have it done by? And then follow-up 1 and follow-up 2 is just a way of updating on progress. It might well be that it's got a bit of a lead time behind it, so it might take 2 or 3 weeks to be able to do it. So just by writing that up, that you've procured the materials, say, and they'll be delivered to site in 2 weeks' time. So it's just a way of giving people some feedback to say, yeah, it's in progress. We haven't forgot about it. These are the next stages. This is when it's coming into the business. So it's a real simple. I'll send you out these templates. I'll send you out a template for the problem resolution meetings and charts, so you can start using them. If you haven't already got something similar to this, you can start using it as part of your trial events. I mentioned earlier about documenting your learning points. What's come out of this. So again, another template I'll send you that you can use is you document what the situation was before. So that might be a picture of a process map, could be your waste walk, could be a graph showing productivity, a picture or some representation of what the process was after. So again, it could be a picture of a changed and modified process map or an improved one. It could be a picture of the metrics showing the improvement on productivity and piece rates. So you've got a visual representation of what the before situation was and what the after situation was. The savings box is how much money have you saved? So how much time is saved, and then from time you can then convert that into money saved within the business itself. How much does it cost to do? So the price that you've had to pay, the amount of hours possibly that you've had to invest into actually carrying out these improvements. So that's the cost of the actual project or the improvement itself. What impacts have you seen on performance? So you've seen productivity improve by 10%. You've seen quality issues drop by 5%. So whatever the metric is, you record down onto the sheet what improvements you've seen on the actual metrics. And then next stage is this idea of the rollout plan. So where else do you think, what do you plan on doing next? So is it a question of, yeah, it's worked, we're going to write this up into a standard operation document, like a step-by-step guide, we're going to make this the new way of working, we're going to communicate it out to everybody? Or it might be a question of, it's not quite worked the way we wanted it to work, therefore we need to go back to the drawing board and modify things slightly, and then once we've modified the process, we'll run the trial again to verify it. So it's just listing down all the next stages of what you're going to do with these improvement points that are coming out of it, and then also giving possibly an indication of which other areas of the business you could look at. So it might be other glass houses, other fields that you may be able to roll these problems, these solutions out to. And this is, again, I'll send you this out. This is what I want you to think about next, is doing, populating one of these improvement activities, closeout forms, so we can start to capture some of the improvements that you're starting to do. We can start to capture some of the benefits of some of the improvements that you're starting to do. So I'll send you the form out, have a bash at filling it in, and then what we can do then is we can just start to collect these and keep a track of how things are progressing.